So we're going to go ahead and do some sort of like programming stuff. So last time we were looking at how to anchor properly our UI elements. So you can have a look at the last YouTube tutorial on Canvas if you either missed that class or you just need a refresher on some stuff. So we're going to very quickly go ahead and create a UI element canvas, and then we're going to create our UI 2D, sorry, UI image. For this, we're going to do some coding. So we're going to start by coding a simple health bar that can go up and down depending on when we take damage. So to create the health bar, I'm just going to go ahead and take my image. We're going to anchor it to the top left-hand corner. I'm going to move it up to the top, whoops, to the top left-hand corner as well. And to make sure that we don't mess up any of our scaling stuff, we're going to go ahead and change the height instead of changing the scale. Move this up to here. Finally, the last thing we want to do is change our pivot point so that our health bar will extend left and right from the left rather than from the center. So we're going to change the X value on our pivot point to 0. And you can see if I press T, or if I select up here our rect tool, which allows us to see this gizmo for changing the transforms of our rect transform UI element, we can see now that this pivot point has changed to the very left, and whenever I change my width is expanding and contracting from the left-hand side. I probably don't want my health bar to just be a single flat square that expands and contracts. We usually want to have a background. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this image, make it a child of the image. And now we're going to change this color to being like black for our black background. Oh wait, it should be really the other way around. So this should be our background because it's the parent, which will be behind the child. So we'll make it black. And then for our image, we're going to go ahead and change this. And we're going to scale it down with our stretch so it's stretched within the inside our parent. And we're going to change these values to, let's see, what kind of border do we want? Maybe like 2, 2, 2, 2. So now we've got a border where if we grab our child and we go ahead and turn this back temporarily just to show you, because our pivot point is at 0, we can change the width now within our health bar. So we could also change this color to be like red or something. You know, there's all sorts of other funky stuff we could do visually, but for now, let's go ahead and say we're happy enough with our visuals. And what we really just want to do now is go ahead and code our stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to call this health bar. Really, this is the health bar background. So I should call this health bar background, I guess. And then this could be the health bar. And then we're going to go ahead and add a script. Now, the interesting thing about scripts is in some ways, sometimes it doesn't really matter where they are. It just matters what objects and things you drag into the variable. So we're going to go ahead and create it on our health bar here, though. We're going to call it health bar, which is going to be our health bar script. Oh, what just happened there? All right, new script, health bar. And we'll double click on the script to open it. So here's our script health bar, and we have it attached. Now, there's something interesting going on here where it just says script. That concerns me a little bit, so I'm going to remove the script. Because it should say health bar, right? And then we'll add it again. There we go, it says health bar. I'm not sure what that glitch was, but we were looking for it to say health bar and it didn't, so I thought maybe something had gone wrong. So we can just remove it and add it again. So the first thing we're going to want to do is go ahead and create the variable that we're going to interact with. And this is going to be, this is going to be a class variable. So the thing we essentially want to do, if I change this back to middle anchoring, the thing we want to do is the thing we're doing by hand, which is changing our width from a small number to a large number. So that means that what we're going to go ahead and do is create a variable, which is going to be our rect transform, because that is width, and that's the variable for our rect transform here, which is a rect transform class component. So all we need to do is create a public transform variable, and we can call this health bar. Whoops, what's going on? That's some strange autofills going on. Let's see, rect transform health bar display, let's call it. So the next thing we're going to do is a bit like when we did our character movement. We want some way of triggering this. So in the future, it's going to be like when we take damage, an enemy attacks us, or we fall into a pit. That will be when we take damage. But for now, let's just make a custom method, which is going to be public void take damage. And we've got to make sure we add our little brackets here, and we get our two curly brackets, and now we've got our public method that will contain the code for taking damage, and we can do this for testing purposes within a simple little if condition for input, just like we did for our movement script. So if input dot get input, so we're going to do get button down, or sorry, get key down is the easier one to use. And we're going to do within the argument, it's going to be key code, and we can just pick something random. So let's say A. So for testing purposes, when we press A, then when this if statement will be true, so this code will execute, and the code will be to execute this method, take damage, and therefore all the code that's in our take damage will occur for testing purposes when we press A. So the thing we're going to want to do is manipulate this rect transform, and we're going to go ahead and try and change the width. Now, the weird thing about the variable of width is just like, remember when we had vector 3s, which were like x, y, and z, and we had to use vector 3s to access those values. We similarly have this thing called size delta, which is a vector 2 of our size. So you can imagine a vector 3 is 3 values, like x, y, z. A vector 2 is 2 values, in this case, width and height. So, for example, we could go ahead and take our size delta and say it's equal to a new vector 2. And within our vector 2, we can have two arguments separated by a comma. We can have our x value, which is going to be our width, and our y value, which is going to be our height. So we could change these to like 10 and 10 just to show you what happens. So I'm going to go ahead and save this script. And let's see what happens when we run the game. If I press the A button, then I get an unassigned reference exception error. And that's because I have this rect transform, but it doesn't know which rect transform I'm talking about. So we're going to have to drag the rect transform of this health bar in here into the variable. Let's try that again. Let's run the game and press A. And now you can see our little bar shrinks to almost nothing here, to 0. It is at least shrinking from the right to left, but it's we now need to work out what values we should feed in. So 10, 10 is obviously wrong. It just makes the tiny little square. So to understand what the height and width should be, we have to try and understand what the height and width were to begin with. So we don't actually want to change the height at all, right? Because we are only trying to make the bar shrink from the left and to the right. So we're going to go ahead and grab the height of our health bar. So we can use this delta size. So we could make a new variable here, which is called float, which could be like health bar y. And that we can find the health bar y by doing delta size dot y. And then instead of setting the y value to 10, we can just set the y value to our health bar y. And now we're not changing the height of our health bar at all, because we grab the health bar from what it currently is, and then we set it to what it currently is, so it will never change. Let's have a look now. So now when we press A, our health bar just goes down to a set X value. So now we have to try and work out what X value it should be. So to work that out, we're going to track our actual health. So our health is going to be a float. So we're going to call this current health. Maybe it should be an int, but we'll make it a float for now. And then the other value we're going to want to do is our max health, because this is going to be a percentage. How do we create a percentage value from our current health and our max health? Let's see. So to create our percentage value, we're going to create another float, which we can have a look at to make sure our percentage value is right. And often when we represent percentage values, instead of having them be from 0 to 100, as you'd imagine, like 50% and 25%, in coding, we always use percentages as values from 0 to 1. If you imagine that 0 is none of the width and 1 is all of the width, then our percentage, for example, 0.5 is going to be 50% of our width, and so on. So we're going to call this percentage. I'm not sure if that's how you spell that because I'm dyslexic, but sure, we'll go for it. So our percentage then we can calculate in our take damage. If our max health is the entire value, then our percentage as a value from 0 to 1 is going to be our current health divided by our max health. And that's because if our current health is equal to our max health, and so if we divide 20 by 20, then we get 1. And if our current health is half of our max health, like we have 10, and we divide 20 by 10, then our value is 0.5, and so on. Let's have a look, and we can run the game. And our width won't change now, but at least we can see if our percentage value is correct. Now, well, it's actually giving us an error because we're trying to divide by 0. So let's change our max health to 10. And let's try it again. And now we can see our percentage is 0 because our current health is 0 of 10. If we put it to 5, then our percentage is now 0.5. And we can experiment with different values and we'll get the correct percentage here. So 2 current health of 100 is a very tiny percentage of only 0.02. So now that we've calculated our percentage, we just need to apply that percentage to calculate a width. So how do we do this? Well, if we think about our percentage as now being a value of 0 to 1, we can multiply the max width of our health bar by that new percentage. Because if we multiply it by 0, then our width will be 0. If we multiply it by 0.5, then we're going to get half as much of that width. And if we multiply it by 1, we'll just get the full width. So we have to work out what the full width is, and we can do this with the same way that we calculated the y bar. So we can go ahead and create a new one that's x. So our x width is going to be equal to delta size.x. And now we use our health bar to set the value of our health bar in code, and we're going to multiply it by our percentage. So whenever I save this out, let's see if this works. Again, we're going to change our max health to 100. We're going to change our max health to, say, 50. And whenever we press A, we can see our health bar is now down to 50% because our percentage is 0.5. Now, there are slightly faster and more efficient ways that you could do this code, but I was trying to lay it out in a sort of really logical mathematical sequence so that you guys can understand the mechanisms of what's going on rather than just having like one line of code where everything's being calculated. So for example, I'm setting these values as variables and then using the variables rather than having these calculations be within the actual argument for our vector2 and things like that. We can even go a step further, and whenever we need a vector2, we could create a vector2 variable first and then use that vector2 variable for it to set to our delta size, or sorry, our size delta and stuff like that. So there's one last thing we want to do, which is we don't want to just set our current health and max health willy-nilly. We want to go ahead and change that based on when we take damage. So if our max health and current health are a certain value, whenever we take damage, we're just going to go ahead and take damage. So we're going to change our current health And we could go ahead and use minus equals to make a relative change to our health equal to the damage taken. For now, we're just going to hard code that every time we take damage, we take 1 point of damage. And we can change that later, but for now, I'll just be happy that our game works. So let's set up our current health as being 100, as well as our max health being 100, so we're full health. And now every time I take health by pressing Y, our health bar will go down. So you can imagine that this could be helpful for losing health as we take damage. All right, that's the end of this tutorial. It's starting with some simple stuff, and it does get some more complex maths involved as we go.